the PDP Laban National Council meeting where I delivered the welcome remarks as Governor of Cebu, since the National Council meeting was held right here in Cebu. We flew to Manila. With me was Secretary Michael Dino, Presidential Assistant for the Visayas, Dr. Jean Loreche, our Chief Pathologist at the Department of Health, Mr. Edmund Liu of the Project Balik Buhay, and General Mel Feliciano of the Chief Implementer for the Visayas. And we reached Malacanang at around 6:06. We had to subject ourselves to the health protocols such as the rapid test and all. So we finally saw the President at around 7 in the evening. And he was accompanied by Secretary Anyo, Secretary Duque, Secretary Harry Roque, Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, and Secretary Galvez, as well as, of course, Senator Bong Go. And the President stated that it seems that in Cebu, you are not following the IATF guidelines. So what is this? You have to follow. Although, on the same breath, he also said that I do recognize the help of the local government units in the implementation of policies, and it is the local government units that are actually on the ground. The President, having served as mayor himself of the city of Davao for 27 years, I know that local governance is close to his heart, and he understands how it is running a city or a province. So I explained. I believe that for most of our fellow Filipinos, you are already aware of the difference. But for those who do not, may I repeat, EO 17, subsequently supported by a provincial ordinance, states that upon arrival, ROFs and OFWs are swabbed, and this is what I told the President, and then they are brought to the hotel. They wait for 2 days. For Cebuanos, if they are tested negative, they go home to their LGUs, and they are swabbed again on the 7th day. They continue the required 14-day quarantine at home. For non-Cebuanos, we ask them to go back to their own provinces, where they shall subject themselves to the health protocols of that particular province. I said that we have not, the way I see it, Mr. President, we are in fact innovating to make it more effective for us. I also pointed out that we saw a steady increase of cases after the 5-day testing rule was implemented, where the returning Filipinos would first be brought to the hotel, and they would only be tested on the 5th day. So that when we implemented by March 31st, going back to the old procedure of testing upon arrival, we saw the steady decrease of cases. And I said, in fact, in Cebu, we have made it even stricter in the sense that it is not a single swab. We swab twice, because once the returning Filipino goes back to his home or his family, he is swabbed again on the 7th day. And then I brought out the humanitarian aspect. Said, Mr. President, these OFWs do not come home to have a good time, actually. Sometimes they do not even have enough cash to pay for the ticket. They borrow money or do a cash advance. And then they come home because there is a reason. It's in times of emergency. It's either that there's a member of the family who is very sick, or someone has died and they're just trying to come home to pay their last respects and say their last goodbyes. We have to look at the humanitarian aspect here, because I know how much you love the OFWs, who we all agree are our unsung heroes. They work abroad, they go through so much hardship in order that they may make the lives of their family a little better. And in fact, they are the pre-COVID, they were the single biggest dollar earner for the country. Now, while this new policy would put further strain on the OWA, because instead of paying for 2 days, this policy of IITF requires a 10-day stay in the hotel, which means that would multiply by 5 the cost. Worst is the strain on returning Filipinos where there is no OWA. And they would have to pay. And they will not be paying the discounted rates of OWA. In Cebu, it's 1/4. But they would have to pay the standard hotel rates of 3,000 to 5,000. So 30,000 to 50,000, you know, that amount of cash can do so much to help their family, and yet they spend it in the hotel. I could see how the president really felt for the OFWs and the returning Filipinos. But he asked for Secretary Duque's opinion, and Secretary Duque started talking about variants, and it's really dangerous, and you know, even if they are tested, you know, they can still be, it can be a false negative, and then when they go home, they may be you know, there's the transmission. And I said, I'm sorry, but if you do not believe the first test, and that's RT-PCR, then why must we conduct another test on the 7th day? What makes the first day test different from the 7th day test if you do not believe that if a person is negative, that is possibly false negative? What about on the 7th day? Well, you wait for that stretch. How do we monitor these returning Filipinos? We do not have enough hotel staff. How do we know they will not have interaction with hotel staff? And if they're in fact infected, they could already cause what you are afraid of, transmission. Well, you know, Secretary Anyo said, you know, well, you are probably showing that it's working, but what if other regions will do the same and nobody will follow anymore because they will have their own way? Well, my answer to that was, shouldn't it be the other way? Like, if you see something working, wouldn't it be worth it to study it? And perhaps find out why it's working? And see if this could perhaps be applied to other regions? If you were to be very, very strict about it, we are only arguing about the hotel stay, which is a heavy financial burden and a heavy emotional burden on our both OFWs and ROFs, away from their families, especially in times of emergency, the very reason why they came home. You know, Dr. Jean Loreche came complete with her figures and showed that Cebu has been able to manage. The variant that you had first segregated as P.3, which later on they called the Central Visayas variant. We are so special to them, really. Very special. You know, in other places, it's called the UK variant, South African variant, it's called now the Indian variant. But in the entire universe, there is only one regional variant, and that's the Central Visayas variant. Because they were saying, you know, this can be like Indian variant and all. See, Dr. Jean showed that we were more, you know, we have been more religious in sending samples. And in the samples that were sent, there was only one that was really confirmed as a UK variant. However, we were able to show that testing upon arrival showed a 0.30 positivity. So that 0.30 were found to be positive. You see, if we were only test them on the 7th day, what would have happened? I also said, because they were insisting that it should be on the 7th day because it's the strongest, you have the highest viral load. So I just asked the very simple question. If we believe that everybody should be tested on the 7th day, are we to presume that everybody who arrives every day coming from different countries, subjected to different environment, are all to be reckoned from day one? That they could have been already infected pero day one, because we are all counting them as day one. I said, what if someone arrived and he's already day 5, but we did not test him because we'll have to test him on the 7th day? By that time, he would have already passed his highest viral load, and he could already have been talking with the hotel staff, or for all you know, might have escaped from his hotel room to go to his family. I mean, these are just very simple questions, but they say that our science tells us that, it should be done this way. So Dr. Loreche said, because Secretary Duque emphasized to the President that, variants might be very highly transmissible and very lethal. It could be very virulent. So it was Dr. Jean Loreche who said, viruses mutate all the time, Mr. President. That's the nature of the virus. And that is why there will always be several variants. Variants. And that it is all about being able to contain and being able to manage. In the end, the President advised Secretary Duque to study our procedure here and see if this could possibly be a good way or innovation that could be adapted. Secretary Duque at first said that, yes, we will discuss this, but or words to that effect, that our minds are made up. So the President had to repeat to study. So they were given until Thursday. At least we did all that we could. Secretary Michael Dino, in fact, because Secretary Anyo said, okay, your cases may be low in Cebu, but we have data to show that the cases in other provinces are rising because they came from Cebu. So Secretary Michael Dino had to speak up for Cebu, being a Cebuano himself. And he said, I'm sorry, I find that statement very unfair. How can you prove that? I found it illogical. Because if they came from Cebu, how come our cases are dropping? Wouldn't the more logical thing have been, our cases are rising, and so we are infecting the others? But, well, it gets more and more confusing over there. I think si Senator Bongo, and I have to say this, he really spoke up for the Cebuanos and the ROFs and OFW. So we have to thank Senator Bongo. He said that, I've been to Cebu, Mr. Mayor, he calls the President Mayor. I've been to Cebu together with E.S. Medialdia. Cebu is doing good, doing fine. We can see that how they are facing this crisis is in a way that they are able to manage and able to, in fact, open the economy now and tourism. So, and I also know what a heavy burden this is for our OFWs and ROFs, because I get all of these calls asking for help. See, Senator Bongo. So he spoke up for this, and he said it's really worth studying how Cebu is doing it. I could see that the President's heart was really for the OFWs and ROFs. I mean, he's a very sincere person, so I could see that. He also understood the duty that all local chief executives face, the accountability to the people that we carry every day. Advisors and even unelected officials, they have no accountability but to the appointing power only. Our accountability is to the people. And he understood why I had to do this. In fact, I thank the President. I heard him clearly when he said, "Gwen, you're a very proactive leader, and that is good. So we will have to study what you are doing. In the meantime, national policy has to be followed. In the meantime, national policy must be followed. And however, we do not admit that we are perfect. So that if your ways could be found to be effective, then perhaps this can even be followed by others." So I told him, "Mr. President, on the national policy must be followed." I said, "Mr. President, at any rate, flights have been diverted. Flights intended for the Manila-Cebu International Airport have now been diverted to Manila. So we don't have any arrivals. And my executive order and the provincial ordinance cannot apply in Manila. So until the Secretary Duque, Secretary Anyo discussed this, and Secretary Harry Roque also spoke out, and Cebuanos have to know this also. He stayed in the middle. He said, "Mr. President, I have to speak. I know that you asked me to speak to Governor Gwen, knowing that she's my BFF. And every time that I talked to her, I kept on repeating that national policy, IATF is national policy, and national policy must be followed. But on the other hand, Mr. President, maybe it's time to ask, why is Cebu still MGCQ after a long 10 months? NCR was never able to achieve that. So what is Cebu doing? Maybe it's time for us to study how Cebu is doing it." That was his statement. In fact, I was happy because at last here is someone, a spokesperson of the IATF, keeping an open mind about finding out what are we doing right over here in Cebu. And so that perhaps what we are doing right could contribute in whatever little way we can to moving forward from this pandemic and easing people's burden, the burden of a devastated economy, but at the same time being able to maintain health and safety protocols, because obviously numbers don't lie, figures don't lie. Our cases continue to be low. But then, for those that may be experiencing high numbers now, maybe they could also people's burden. They may also take a page from the Cebu handbook on how we manage times when we had increases or surges. Perhaps that's something that might help. I mean, we are all Filipinos here. We want to help each other. Let's help each other as a country, as a nation. And this is not all talk over here in Cebu. This is all supported by validated, verified, irrefutable data.
Go, just a follow-up. What will happen to your executive order? Padayon gihapon, status quo.
Once period of diverting the flight would have elapsed.
You know, I never answer speculative questions. You know that. You know me better than that. So I am reporting to you on what is. I do not want to be those that I have recently criticized, that they have with their hypothesis come up with policies that severely burden people because they have based all of this on their presumptions and speculations.
Could they at least give a say as to when they would have the final say on the
He was given until Thursday. Si Secretary Duque. In fact, the President repeated that.
So doon na pa ilaing meeting na hitabo ko with Secretary Doki and you.
No, I don't know. He said he will confer with his advisors again. The ones who are calling us Central Visayas variant and who keep on hammering the fact that cases in Central Visayas are rising. I just want to make it very clear to the rest of those of you who are listening right now, who are watching right now, Central Visayas, I repeat, is not just Bohol or Negros. They are part of Central Visayas. But so is Cebu, and so is Siquijor. And the 4 provinces are 4 separate islands.
How would you describe the meeting, the meeting? Would you consider it are we successful with our objective of going there to Malacanang?
May I cautiously state that in being able to present to the President our position, why we have done it, and how everyone was on board in coming up with this policy. In fact, well represented by the presence of General Mel Feliciano himself, who is Mista of General Galvez. And of course, you have the private sector there, si Edmond Liu. And you have the scientists. If they have their science, we also have our science. Chief pathologist, UP, a product of UP, Dr. Jean Loreche, and Presidential Assistant for the Visayas, who also, of course, is part of the Duterte administration and sees what impact this has been on the Duterte administration, because the diversion of flights was signed by Secretary Medialdia. So, right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but those that have been affected are feeling, bad against the President, not against IATF, not against Secretary Duque, or not against Secretary Anyo, but against the administration. And that is why Secretary Michael Dino also had to speak out in defense of the President. So, I think in the sense that the President was able to be given a different point of view. Because in fact, when Secretary Duque kept on repeating, Mr. President, variants are so scary, they can be highly transmissible, and we do not know how deadly they can be. Look at India, Then another scientist or another doctor spoke up, and that was Dr. Loreche, who said, Mr. President, viruses always mutate. In fact, the SARS and CoV mutated. This is what's happening now. We will see so many variants coming up. And I think it was kind of a surprise to hear that kind of different point of view. And more so, and most of all, the President in that meeting really showed his compassion for the OFWs and returning Filipinos. You could see it in his face, how he really cared for the OFWs and ROFs. He was really trying to look for a way. First, he said financial. He was asking for a budget, if we have enough. But then he was saying, do we still have enough? So, Mr. President, beyond that, it's really, they're away from their families. They have very short time. There's an emergency that they have to attend to. And beyond that, this can work. We can have that quarantine, but let's do it at home. Anyway, returning Filipinos, OFWs, I am sure for many of them, their homes qualify for home quarantine. Well, Secretary Duque started saying that, but we have now found out that the high transmission is caused at the home. It's because of this home quarantine that is caused the transmission. It's very high. So I have to remind him, Secretary Duque, home quarantine is allowed by your DOH memorandum. You have a DOH memorandum circular which defines what homes can qualify for home quarantine. So you sanction it. You allow it.
How would you describe the meeting, the entire meeting? Is it tense or is it kuan lang, chill?
No, it's okay. I mean, may I say also that Secretary Duque, Secretary Anyo they were not hostile, no? They were not, they were very courteous. Secretary Galvez and Secretary Delfin were very quiet. Anyway, they were wearing masks, so I could not say whether they were smiling or not. But they never said a word. Senator Bong spoke up for us. You have to thank him for that. And Secretary Harry Roque asked a very valid question, very thought-provoking, but very important, saying, why is Cebu on MGCQ for such a long time now, something we have never been able to achieve here at NCR? Isn't it worth looking? What is Cebu doing? But you know, maybe I'll ask for low risk. Dugay naman tang MGCQ. How come we are not classified as low risk? And then our fans in Manila will say, no, MGCQ. Mga mag low risk, MGCQ. Low risk lagi ta. Dili, MGCQ. MGCQ.
So, your message na lang to the returning OFWs na Cebuanos who are very much affected to this.
And may I now speak in Cebuano? Akong gusto ipaabot sa tanan nato gyud ng mga kaigsuunang OFWs, ROFs nga mga Cebuanon nga karon apektado tungod aning pag-divert sa flights that will be that would have been intended para diri sa MCIA nga tuwa na ron sa Manila. Nahibaw ko sa inyong giangtos bisan tuod og ako mismo dili ko OFW, dili ko ROF, pero maminaw magud ko. Nakabasa ko sa tanan ninyo. Grabe ka iron, hapit na mobuto ang social media kay bawman mo sa tanan ninyong mga sites. Grabe gyud kaayo ang reaction. Nahibaw ko unsa inyong giagian ron. Unta masabtan ang inyong sitwasyon. Grabe na ang sakripisyo ninyo dito sa gawas. Pag-abot ninyo dili makatarunganon nga magpasan pa mo dugang nga kalisod. In fact, at one point in our meeting, the President said the same. It is the constitutional right of every Filipino to come home. And we must look into that. So